The massive space station Kepler-7 floated in the darkness between stars. Its silver walls gleamed under artificial lights as hundreds of different alien species walked through its corridors. Today was special. The Galactic Medical Academy was starting its first mixed species training program. Park Ji-won stood at the window of his small room, looking out at the stars. He was 28 years old and had served as a combat medic on Earth for 6 years. His hands were rough from years of emergency work, and his eyes held the tired look of someone who had seen too much pain. He was the only human in the program. The other students had been talking about him behind his back. Ji-won could hear their whispered conversations in the hallways. They called Earth a hellworld, a planet so dangerous that only the strongest could survive. They said humans were violent and unpredictable. Some were afraid of him. Others were just curious. Ji-won walked to the main classroom where other students were already gathering. The room was huge, with seats designed for different body types. Some chairs were made for the tall, thin Villani, people with their crystal-like skin. Others were filled with water for the fish-like Marani. The Thurok students sat on special platforms that supported their insect-like bodies. Near the front of the room, 3 alien students were sitting together. Cathara was a Villani female, about 7 feet tall with pale blue skin that looked like living crystal. When she moved, tiny lights sparkled under her skin. She was known to be one of the best healing students in her class. Next to her sat Tikalon, a Thurok male. His body looked like a giant ant walking on 2 legs with 4 arms and large black eyes. The Thurok were famous for making medicine from their own bodies. They could create healing chemicals as easily as humans could sweat. The third student was Merdala, a Marani female. She looked like a human woman, but her skin was light green, and she breathed through gills on her neck. Her people could touch a wound and make cells grow back perfectly. They never left scars. All 3 students stopped talking when Ji-won walked past them. He could feel their eyes following him as he found a seat in the back of the room. He had learned to ignore the stares. Being the only human in a group of aliens was lonely, but he was used to being alone. Professor Zephian entered the room. He was an Altarian, one of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy. His purple skin was wrinkled with age, and his 4 eyes could see things others missed. He was the head of emergency medicine at the academy. "Welcome, students," Professor Zephian said in his deep voice. "Today we begin something new. For the first time in academy history, we have students from 5 different species learning together. Each of you brings different knowledge and different ways of healing." He looked directly at Ji-won. "Some of you come from peaceful worlds where healing is an art. Others come from more challenging places where medicine must be fast and strong. We are here to learn from each other." The professor activated a holographic display showing different alien anatomies. "You will work in mixed teams for all your training exercises. This is not by accident. In space, you will treat patients from many species. You must understand how different bodies work and how different minds think about healing." Kithara raised one of her long crystal fingers. "Professor, what if some methods are too different from others? What if some ways of healing are wrong?" "Professor." Zephian's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "There are no wrong ways to save a life, Kithara. Only ways that work and ways that do not work. Sometimes the most surprising method is the most effective." Tiklon clicked his mandibles together nervously. "But surely some methods are more civilized than others. More gentle?" "Gentle is good when you have time," the professor replied. "But what happens when there is no time? What happens when gentle methods are too slow?" The students looked confused. On their worlds, healing was always done slowly and carefully. The idea of rushing through medical treatment seemed wrong to them. Professor Zephian began assigning teams. Team 7 will consist of Kithara, Tiklon, Merdala, and Park Ji-won. You will work together for the next 6 months. The 3 alien students looked at each other with worry. They had hoped to avoid working with the human. They had heard stories about human medicine, cutting people open, breaking bones to fix them, causing pain to stop pain. It seemed like madness to them. Ji-won walked over to his new teammates. "Hello," he said simply. I am Jiwan. We know who you are, Kathara said, her voice cold. We have heard about human medicine. We have heard about your wars and your violence. We do not understand how hurting someone can heal them. Tiklan added. The Thurok way is to create perfect healing compounds that work slowly and gently. Murdala nodded. The Marani way is to encourage natural healing. We help the body fix itself. We never cause more damage. Jiwan looked at his teammates. He had expected this reaction. I understand your concerns, he said calmly. Maybe we can learn from each other. Your methods sound very advanced. Advanced and civilized, Kathara said firmly. Not like the barbaric methods from your Hellworld. The word barbaric hung in the air like a challenge. Jiwan felt the familiar anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would only prove their point about humans being violent. Perhaps we should start with simple exercises, Professor Zephian announced to the class. Tomorrow we begin with basic trauma response. Each team will be given a different emergency scenario to handle. As the class ended, the three aliens quickly gathered their things and left together. They did not invite Jiwan to join them for study time or meals. He was left alone again, watching them walk away. Jiwan returned to his room and looked at his medical bag. Inside were tools that would terrify his teammates: scalpels, bone saws, clamps, and needles. On Earth, these were instruments of healing. Here they probably looked like weapons. He thought about his first day as a combat medic, holding pressure on a soldier's torn artery while bullets flew overhead. There had been no time for gentle healing compounds or perfect cellular regeneration. There had only been blood, pain, and the desperate need to keep someone alive long enough to reach a real hospital. Tomorrow would be interesting. His teammates expected him to fail, to prove that human medicine was too crude for civilized beings. But Jiwan had learned long ago that sometimes being crude was better than being dead. He closed his medical bag and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. The simulation room was designed to look like the inside of a crashed transport ship. Smoke filled the air, red emergency lights flashed, and sparks flew from broken wires hanging from the ceiling. The smell of burning metal made it feel real and dangerous. Professor Zephian stood at the observation window above the room. Team 7, you have 20 minutes to save your patient. Begin now. In the center of the wreckage lay an android that looked exactly like a hurt Altarian. Fake. Blood pooled around its body. Its right leg was twisted at an impossible angle, with white bone sticking through the skin. The chest barely moved up and down. A metal bar had fallen across its lower back. Keth quote. Ara immediately knelt beside the android and began pulling crystals from her medical pouch. I need complete silence to tune the healing frequency, she said. This will take about 15 minutes to establish the proper harmonic resonance. Tikalan moved to the android's other side and started examining its wounds. His 4 hands worked, quickly but carefully. I am analyzing the injury pattern to determine which healing compounds to synthesize. The process should take 12 minutes for optimal results. Murdala placed her webbed hands gently on the android's chest. I can encourage cellular regeneration, but I must work slowly. The damaged tissue needs time to remember its proper form. This cannot be rushed. All 3 aliens began their careful, methodical work. Kathara's crystals started to glow as she found the right healing frequency. Tikalan's body began producing chemical compounds and special glands. Murdala closed her eyes and concentrated on the damaged cells. Jiwan looked at the android and saw something his teammates had missed. It's bleeding out, he said urgently. Look at the blood pressure readings. Please do not interrupt us, Kathara said without looking up. Healing harmony requires concentration. We need to stop the bleeding first, Jiwan insisted. It will die before you can heal it. Impossible, Tiklan said. Our methods are proven effective. Humans simply do not understand proper medical technique. Jiwan watched the android's vital signs dropping rapidly. The fake blood continued to pour from the compound fracture. In a real situation, the patient would be dead in minutes. His teammates were focused on their sophisticated healing methods, but they were ignoring the immediate danger. Without asking permission, Jiwan dropped to his knees beside the android. He pressed both hands directly onto the bleeding wound, ignoring the fake blood that soaked through his clothes. "I need something to tie around the leg," he said. "What are you doing?" Murdala gasped. "You are contaminating the injury site." Jiwan pulled off his jacket and tore a long strip from the sleeve. He wrapped it tightly around the android's leg above the fracture. "Making a tourniquet," he said, pulling the fabric as tight as possible. The bleeding slowed immediately. "You are cutting off blood flow to the limb," Cathara said, horrified. "You will cause tissue death." "Better to lose a leg than lose a life," Jiwan replied. He turned his attention to the metal bar across the android's back. "Help me move this carefully. Possible spinal injury." "We cannot move an injured patient," Tiklon protested. "It is too dangerous." "It is more dangerous to leave it there," Jiwan said. He looked around the debris and found a flat piece of metal. "This will work as a backboard." His teammates watched, in shock as Jiwan carefully slid the makeshift backboard under the android's body. He moved with practiced efficiency, supporting the head and neck while maneuvering the metal sheet into position. Within minutes, he had the android properly immobilized. The monitor showed the android's heart stopping. Cathara's crystals were finally tuned correctly, but it was too late. Tiklon had produced the perfect healing compound, but there was no heartbeat to circulate it. Myrdala's cellular regeneration was ready to begin, but the cells were dying without oxygen. "Beginning chest compressions," Jiwan announced. He placed his hands on the android's chest and began pushing hard and fast. The artificial ribs made cracking sounds under the pressure. "Stop!" Myrdala cried. "You are breaking its bones." "That is normal," Jiwan said, never stopping the compressions. "Broken ribs heal. Dead patients do not." He continued the compressions for 2 minutes, then checked the pulse. Nothing. He placed his mouth over the androids and gave 2 rescue breaths, then went back to chest compressions. His teammates watched in fascination and horror as Jiwan's violent methods brought the android back to life. The heart monitor showed a weak but steady rhythm. The bleeding had stopped completely. The android was stabilized. "Time," Professor Zephian announced. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jiwan's heavy breathing. He was covered in fake blood and sweat, his clothes torn from the makeshift tourniquet. His teammates stood around their unused equipment, looking confused and disturbed. Professor Zephian entered the room with a data tablet. "Interesting results," he said, looking at the readings. Team 7's patients survived. Teams 1 through 6 all lost their patients to blood loss during the initial treatment phase. Cathara looked at the data in disbelief. "That cannot be correct. Our healing methods are far more advanced than human techniques." "Advanced, yes," the professor agreed, "but advancement means nothing if the patient dies before treatment is complete." Jiwan's methods were crude, but they were also fast and effective. Tiklon clicked his mandibles nervously. "But he hurt the patient. He broke bones and cut off blood flow. These actions seem more like attack than healing." "Sometimes healing requires temporary harm," Professor Zephian said. "On peaceful worlds, with perfect conditions, you have the luxury of gentle methods, but emergencies do not wait for perfect conditions." Myrdala shook her head. "We still do not understand. How can causing pain and damage be considered medicine?" Jiwan wiped the fake blood from his hands. "On Earth we have a saying, first, do no harm. But sometimes the greatest harm is doing nothing while someone dies." "This is barbaric," Cathara said firmly. "Civilized medicine should never require violence." "What is more civilized?" Jiwan asked. "Perfect healing techniques that take too long, or imperfect techniques that save lives?" Professor Zephian watched the exchange with interest. "Team 7 will continue working together. I want to see how different approaches to medicine can be integrated. Perhaps you can learn from each other." As they left the simulation room, Jiwan's teammates walked ahead of him, whispering among themselves. He could hear fragments of their conversation, words like savage, brutal, and primitive. They had seen his methods work, but they still could not accept them. Jiwan understood their reaction. To beings from peaceful worlds, human medicine must seem like organized violence. They had never been in situations where gentle healing was not enough. They had never had to choose between causing pain and watching someone die. But the android had survived. That was what mattered. In the end, results were more important than methods. His teammates would need time to understand this lesson. The next few months would be challenging for all of them. The formal complaint arrived 3 days later. Jiwan sat in the Academy's disciplinary office, reading the official document on a holographic display. The charges were serious. Inappropriate use of aggressive medical procedures, contamination of sterile treatment environment, and causing unnecessary trauma to patient. Dr. Hyon entered the office, carrying his own data tablet. He was a middle-aged Korean man with graying hair and tired eyes. As the Academy's human medical advisor, he had been called in to review the case. Jiwan had never met him before, but he felt relieved to see another human face. "So you are the one causing trouble," Dr. Hyon said in Korean, sitting down across from Jiwan. "I saved the patient," Jiwan replied, also in Korean. "The others were too slow." "I know. I have reviewed the simulation data." Dr. Hyon switched to Galactic Standard Language as Professor Zephian entered the room. The humans' methods were unorthodox but effective. Professor Zephian took his seat at the head of the table. "The other team members have filed formal complaints. They believe Jiwan's methods constitute assault rather than medical treatment." The door opened, and the 3 alien students entered. Cathara, Tiklon, and Merdala looked nervous but determined. They had spent 3 days preparing their case against their human teammate. "Please state your concerns," Professor Zephian said formally. Keth quote. Era stood first. "Professor, we cannot work with someone who treats medicine like warfare. Jiwan's methods are violent and primitive. He broke the patient's ribs, cut off blood circulation, and contaminated the injury site with his bare hands." Tiklon nodded his large insect head. "The Thurok have practiced medicine for 50,000 years. Never in our history have we intentionally caused pain to heal someone. It goes against everything we believe about the healing arts." Merdala's gills fluttered with emotion. "He moved an injured patient with possible spinal damage. On our world, such action would be considered attempted murder. How can we learn proper medicine from someone who breaks every rule of patient safety?" Professor Zephian listened carefully to each complaint. "And what do you propose should be done?" "Remove him from the program," Cathara said firmly. "His presence prevents us from learning real medical techniques. We need to work with civilized healers, not barbarians from a hell world." The word barbarian made Jiwan's hands clench into fists, but he remained silent. Dr. Hyon noticed the reaction and placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Jiwan," Professor Zephian said, "please explain your methods to your teammates. Help them understand why you acted as you did." Jiwan stood slowly. He looked at each of his teammates before speaking. "On Earth, we have something called the Golden Hour. It means you have 60 minutes to save someone with serious injuries. After that, they usually die no matter what you do." 60 minutes seems like plenty of time, Tiklon said. "Our healing compounds only need 12 minutes to synthesize." 12 minutes is too long when someone is bleeding to death," Jiwan replied. "The android was losing blood faster than its body could replace it. Your perfect healing compounds would not have mattered if it died while you were making them." Cathara's crystal skin flickered with irritation. "So you chose to hurt it instead of heal it?" "I chose to save its life instead of letting it die beautifully," Jiwan said. "Yes, I broke ribs during chest compressions, but broken ribs heal in 6 weeks. Death is permanent." Dr. Hyon activated his data tablet showing medical statistics from different worlds. Human medicine developed on a planet where everything tries to kill you. Poisonous animals, deadly diseases, natural disasters, wars. We learned that perfect healing is useless if you die before it is complete. "But surely there are better ways," Merdala said. "More civilized approaches that do not require violence?" "Tell me," Dr. Hyun said, looking at each alien student. What happens on your worlds when someone has a heart attack? We use harmonic resonance to encourage the heart muscle to heal itself, Kethara answered. It takes about 30 minutes for complete cardiac restoration. 30 minutes, Dr. Hyan repeated. The human brain dies after 4 minutes without oxygen. Your patient would be brain dead before your healing began. Tiklon clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. We have compounds that can restore brain function. After the brain is already dead, Dr. Hyan asked. Can your compounds bring back consciousness that has been gone for half an hour? The aliens looked uncomfortable. They had never encountered medical problems that required immediate action. Their advanced healing methods assumed they would always have time to work properly. What about surgery? Dr. Hyan continued. What do you do when something inside the body needs to be repaired? We would never cut open a living being, Merdala said, horrified. That would cause terrible trauma. So if someone had a burst appendix, you would let them die rather than remove it. We would encourage the appendix to heal itself, she replied. But her voice was less certain now. Professor Zephian had been listening quietly to the exchange. I propose a practical test. Elder Nim has agreed to let us use the old mining facility for advanced emergency scenarios. Each team will demonstrate their methods on progressively more difficult cases. That seems fair, Kethara said. Our methods will prove themselves superior when given proper conditions. What if the conditions are not proper? Jiwan asked. What if there is no time for harmonic resonance or cellular regeneration? What if the patient will die in minutes instead of hours? Impossible, Tikalon said confidently. Medical emergencies always allow time for proper treatment. That is why they are called emergencies instead of disasters. Dr. Hyan and Professor Zephian exchanged glances. Both had seen real disasters, situations where proper treatment was a luxury no one could afford. The test will begin in 1 week, Professor Zephian announced. Each team will work separately to demonstrate their approach to emergency medicine. The results will determine whether human methods have a place in galactic medical practice. As the meeting ended, the alien students gathered their materials and left together, discussing their plans for the test. They were confident that their advanced methods would easily outperform crude human techniques. Jiwan remained behind with Dr. Hyun and Professor Zephian. They have no idea what they are about to face, he said quietly. No, Dr. Hyun agreed. They come from worlds where medicine is an art form. They have never seen medicine as a battle against death. Professor Zephian's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Perhaps it is time they learned that the universe is not always as peaceful as their home worlds. Sometimes survival requires methods that seem brutal to those who have never fought for their lives. Jiwan looked out the window at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there was Earth, the Hellworld that had taught humanity to fight death with everything they had. Soon his teammates would understand why humans had learned to be so ruthless in their compassion. The alarm screamed through the corridors of Kepler 7 at 0347 station time. Jiwan woke immediately, his combat training kicking in before he was fully conscious. Emergency lights bathed the hallways in red as he grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the industrial section. The mining accident was real, not a simulation. A support beam in the lower levels had collapsed during routine maintenance, trapping 4 workers in the twisted wreckage. Smoke and dust filled the air. Sparks flew from damaged electrical systems. The smell of burning metal and leaked coolant made breathing difficult. Professor Zephian was already at the scene, coordinating rescue efforts with the station's emergency teams. Team 7, he called as Jiwan arrived. This is your practical test. 4 casualties, different species, multiple trauma injuries. Work separately, save who you can. Kethara, Tiklon, and Merdala arrived moments later, carrying their specialized medical equipment. They looked shocked by the chaos and destruction around them. This was nothing like the clean, controlled environment of their training simulations. Each team takes 1 patient, Professor Zephian announced. Jiwan, you have the human technician Kim Daewon trapped under that beam. Kethara, the Villani engineer with crystal fracturing, is yours. Tiklon, treat the Thurok worker with the crushed limbs. Merdala, the Marani scientist, has severe atmospheric poisoning. Jiwan looked at his patient. Daewon was pinned under a massive steel beam, conscious but in severe pain. His left leg was completely crushed, blood pooling around the twisted metal. His breathing was shallow and rapid, signs of shock setting in. Daewon, can you hear me? Jiwan knelt beside the trapped man, checking his pulse and pupil response. It hurts, Daewon whispered. I cannot feel my leg. I am going to get you out of here, Jiwan promised. He looked at the beam, too heavy to lift, too thick to cut with standard tools. But there was a plasma cutter nearby, used for mining operations, across the wreckage. His teammates were setting up their equipment. Kauthara had arranged her healing crystals in a perfect circle around the injured Vellani, but the constant vibrations from the damaged structure kept disrupting her harmonic frequency. She needed complete stillness for her methods to work. Tick, Lon, was trying to synthesize healing compounds, but his body required specific environmental conditions. The smoke, heat, and chemical contamination were interfering with his biological processes. The compounds he produced were weak and unstable. Mare, Dala, had found her Marani patient, but the atmospheric poisoning required her to work in clean water. The available water was contaminated with coolant and debris. She could not safely use her cellular regeneration techniques without risking further poisoning. Jiwan grabbed the plasma cutter and fired it up. The tool was designed for cutting metal, not performing surgery, but it was what he had. Daewon, this is going to hurt, but I need to amputate your leg to get you free. Do it, Daewon gasped. Better alive with one leg than dead with two. The plasma cutter sliced through bone and tissue with surgical precision. Jiwan worked quickly, cauterizing blood vessels as he cut to prevent massive bleeding. It was brutal, primitive surgery, but it was effective. Within minutes, Daewon was free from the beam. Jiwan applied emergency clamps to the amputation site and started an IV drip using his portable medical kit. He gave Daewon painkillers and fluid replacement therapy, then moved him to a safer area, away from the continuing structural collapses. With his primary patient stabilized, Jiwan looked at the other casualties. His teammates were struggling with their sophisticated methods in the harsh environment. Keth, Era, S crystals, kept going out of tune because of the vibrations. I cannot establish harmonic resonance under these conditions, she said desperately. The healing frequency requires perfect acoustic harmony. Then do not use frequency, Jiwan said, kneeling beside the injured Vellani. The creature's crystal-like skin was cracked in multiple places, leaking luminous fluid. Use pressure bandages to stop the bleeding, then stabilize the crystal matrix with metal splints. But that is not how Vellani healing works, Kathera protested. Vellani, healing is not working right now, Jiwan pointed out. He showed her how to apply direct pressure to the cracks, stopping the fluid loss immediately. Then he used metal strips from the wreckage as improvised splints, holding the fractured crystals in place. Tick. Lon was having similar problems. His healing compounds were not forming properly in the contaminated environment. My biochemistry is failing, he said in panic. I cannot produce effective medicines. Jiwan examined the injured Thurok worker. Multiple limbs were crushed, but the creature was still conscious and breathing. Use what you have, he told Tiklon. Even weak compounds are better than nothing. Apply them directly to the wounds while I set the broken bones. Using pieces of debris as splints, Jiwan immobilized the Thurok's injured limbs. The crude splints were not perfect, but they prevented further damage and gave Tiklon's weak healing compounds a chance to work. Mare, Dala was trying to treat the poisoned Marani in contaminated water. This is impossible, she said. I cannot use cellular regeneration in polluted conditions. It will make the poisoning worse. Then do not use cellular regeneration yet, Jiwan said. He had grabbed an emergency atmospheric processor from the mining equipment. Use this to create a clean breathing environment first. Treat the poisoning, then worry about healing damaged tissue. He showed Merdala how to set up the processor to create a bubble of clean atmosphere around her patient. The Marani's breathing improved immediately as the poisoned air was filtered out. But this is not proper medical technique, Meridala protested. We are using mining equipment for medicine. We are using whatever works to keep them alive, Jiwan replied. Perfect technique means nothing if the patient dies while you are setting it up. One by one, the alien students watched Jiwan adapt human emergency methods to treat their species' unique biology. He used plasma cutters as scalpels, metal debris as splints, atmospheric processors as life support systems. Everything was crude, improvised, and desperate, but it worked. Within an hour, all 4 patients were stabilized and ready for transport to the station's medical center. The alien students stared at Jiwan in amazement and confusion. Their sophisticated healing methods had failed completely, but his primitive techniques had saved everyone. I do not understand, Cathara said quietly. How did you know how to treat injuries in species you have never studied? I did not treat species, Jiwan replied, wiping blood and coolant from his hands. I treated problems. Bleeding, broken, bones poisoning, shock. The solutions are the same regardless of what species has the problem. Tiklan clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You used our own techniques, but in different ways. Ways we never thought of. Your techniques are excellent, Jiwan agreed. But they require perfect conditions. Emergency medicine is about making imperfect techniques work in impossible conditions. As the rescue teams carried the patients away, Merdala looked around at the wreckage. On our worlds, we would have waited for proper medical facilities. We would have let them die rather than use such violent methods. And that is why your worlds need emergency medical protocols, Professor Zephian said, appearing beside them. Jiwan has shown you something important today. Sometimes the most advanced medicine comes from the most desperate situations. The Tau alien students were quiet as they walked back to their quarters. They had seen their teammates save lives using methods they had considered barbaric. They were beginning to understand that human medicine was not cruel by choice, but effective, by necessity. The test was over, but their real education was just beginning. 2 weeks after the mining accident, a transport ship arrived at Kepler 7, carrying Professor Lee Min-jae, the new director of emergency medicine for the Galactic Medical Academy. She was a small Korean woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Her reputation preceded her. She had served as chief surgeon on 3 different colony worlds and had written the standard textbook on multi-species trauma treatment. Jiwan watched from the observation deck as Professor Lee's ship docked. He had received word that morning about his new assignment. The Academy was creating a permanent human medical program, and he would be the first instructor. The thought both excited and terrified him. In the 2 weeks since the accident, his relationship with his alien teammates had changed completely. Cathara no longer avoided him in the hallways. Tiklan had started asking questions about human physiology during study sessions. Merdala had even invited him to join their group for meals. The change had begun the day after the accident. Cathara had found Jiwan in the library, reading about Villani crystal biology. She sat down across from him, her luminous skin flickering with nervous energy. I have been thinking about what happened in the mines, she said quietly. You saved our patients using methods we had never considered. Your methods would have worked perfectly in proper conditions, Jiwan replied. My methods only work when everything else fails. But that is the point, Cathara said. On Vela Prime, we always have proper conditions. Our hospitals are perfect, our equipment never fails, our patients are always stable enough for proper healing. We never learned what to do when conditions are not perfect. Tiklon had joined them, followed by Mayor_Dala. For the first time since the program began, they sat together as equals rather than as suspicious observers. I have been researching human medicine, Tiklon said, his compound eyes reflecting the library lights. Your species performs surgery by cutting people open. You replace organs with mechanical parts. You inject foreign chemicals directly into the bloodstream. By Thurok standards, these should be acts of violence. But they save lives, Merdala added. We have never seen medicine used as a weapon against death itself. On Mari, we work with the body's natural healing. We never fight against damage, we encourage repair. But sometimes there is no time for encouragement. Jiwon looked at his teammates, no longer opponents but colleagues trying to understand a different approach to healing. Human medicine is not better than your methods, he said carefully. It is just different, designed for different situations. Desperate situations, Cathara corrected. Situations where gentle methods are too slow and perfect technique is too complicated. Over the following days, they had begun working together differently. Instead of competing approaches, they started combining them. Jiwon would stabilize a patient using human emergency techniques, then his teammates would use their advanced methods for healing and recovery. The results were remarkable. Patients recovered faster and more completely than with any single approach. Human methods kept them alive long enough for alien healing to work perfectly. Now Professor Lee was here to make it official. The Academy's first human emergency medicine program would begin in 3 months. With Jiwon as the primary instructor. Professor Lee called him to her office that evening. The room was sparse but functional, with medical texts from dozens of species lining the walls. She looked exactly like what she was, a doctor who had seen everything and survived to teach others. So you are the human who has been causing excitement among the alien students, she said in Korean, gesturing for him to sit. I have been teaching them emergency stabilization techniques, Jiwon replied. Nothing revolutionary. Revolutionary enough that 3 species have requested complete revisions to their medical training programs, Professor Lee said with a slight smile. The Villani want to learn combat healing. The Thurok are asking about biochemical emergency protocols. The Marani have submitted a formal request for aggressive intervention techniques. Jiwon felt surprised. He had not realized his influence had spread beyond his immediate teammates. They do not understand what they are asking for, Professor Lee continued. They see the effectiveness of human methods, but they do not understand the cost. Emergency. Medicine is not just about technique. It is about accepting that sometimes saving a life requires causing pain. My teammates have learned that lesson, Jiwon said. They understand now that perfect healing is useless if it comes too late. Do they? Professor Lee activated her holographic display, showing course schedules and student assignments. Starting next month, you will teach the new curriculum. Phase 1, Human Emergency Stabilization. Phase 2, Alien Advanced Healing. Phase 3, Integrated Treatment Protocols. She showed him the class roster. 30 students from 12 different species, all requesting training in Hellworlder medicine. The demand was unprecedented. There is something else, Professor Lee said. Dr. An Sujin will be arriving next week. She is one of our best surgeons, and she has volunteered to attempt the galaxy's first interspecies surgical procedure. Jiwon looked at the medical files she displayed. A Thurok patient with a damaged primary heart needed surgery that combined human techniques with alien healing. It would require cutting open the patient's thorax, removing the damaged organ, and replacing it with a biomechanical hybrid, all while Thurok healers maintained the patient's other biological functions. Why are they trusting us with something so important? Jiwon asked. Because they have seen what happens when human methods and alien healing work together, Professor Lee replied. The results are better than either approach alone. 3 months. Later, Jiwon stood in front of his first class. 30 alien students looked at him with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and slight fear. Among them were Cathara, Tiklan, and Merdala, now serving as teaching assistants. Welcome to Human Emergency Medicine, he began. This course will teach you methods that may seem brutal, primitive, or violent. You will learn to break bones to save lives, to cut people open to heal them, and to cause pain in order to prevent death. A young Altarian student raised her hand. Professor, is it true that humans perform surgery while patients are awake? Sometimes, Jiwon replied. When there is no time for proper anesthesia, we do what we must. The goal is always to save the life, regardless of the discomfort involved. Cathara stood up from her assistant's seat. I have worked with Professor Park for 6 months, she announced to the class. I have seen him save lives using methods that initially horrified me. I have learned that there is no shame in using any technique that preserves life. Ticklon nodded his agreement. Human medicine is not gentle, but it is effective. When perfect conditions are not available, imperfect methods are better than no methods at all. The most important lesson we have learned, Myrdala added, is that medicine is not about following rules or maintaining traditions. It is about adapting to save lives no matter what adaptation is required. As the weeks passed, Jiwan watched his students struggle with concepts that challenged everything they had been taught about healing. They learned to perform CPR, to set broken bones, to stop bleeding with direct pressure. They learned that sometimes hurting someone was the most compassionate thing you could do. The breakthrough came during the final exam. A simulated disaster scenario with multiple casualties in limited time. The students worked in mixed teams, using human stabilization techniques followed by their species' advanced healing methods. Every patient survived. Every team successfully integrated emergency protocols with sophisticated healing. The combination proved more effective than either approach used alone. On graduation day, Professor Lee addressed the first class of integrated emergency medicine students. "You have learned something unprecedented in galactic medical history," she said. "You have learned to combine the desperate courage of human emergency medicine with the sophisticated precision of alien healing arts." She gestured to the large display showing medical statistics from across the galaxy. Hospitals using integrated protocols report 30% higher survival rates for emergency cases. Recovery times are reduced by 40%. Patient satisfaction scores have reached record highs. Dr. An Sujin stepped forward to present the final demonstration. Her interspecies surgical procedure had been so successful that she now performed them regularly, training other surgeons in the technique. "The galaxy has learned that advancement comes not from replacing old methods with new ones," she said, "but from combining the best of all approaches. Human medicine provides the speed and aggression needed for emergencies. Alien healing provides the precision and gentleness needed for recovery." Jiwan watched his former teammates receive their instructor certifications. Cathara would teach harmonic emergency medicine. Ticklon would develop rapid synthesis healing compounds. Myrdala would create mobile cellular regeneration units for disaster response. As the ceremony ended, Professor Lee approached him with a new assignment. "The Colonial Medical Service has requested a team of integrated emergency specialists," she said. "They want to establish field hospitals on frontier worlds where traditional medicine is not available." Jiwan looked at the mission parameters. Dangerous worlds, primitive conditions, limited